DNA doesn't die. I bought the most expensive casket the funeral home had, and I put it inside that casket, and I could hear the gratitude. You want to know the truth? I've never said that before, but I could feel and hear the gratitude of the ancestors who were unsettled, that they were laid to rest without recognition. They had families too. They have descendants who want to speak their names too. And they laid in an anonymous, dusty grave for more than a century. And it shows you why, Brother Aj, Black history matters. And we're living in a time where, for the first time in our lifetime, you and I are almost the same age. Black History Month has been canceled by the federal government. And it just shows you why our history must be protected and cherished, because there has always been a movement to cancel us. And here we are.
It seems to me that our ancestors want us to say all their names.
Yes. So we are a heartbeat away from joining the ancestors. Let it be clear. And I can tell you, I don't want to be forgotten. Brother Ajay, you don't want to be forgotten. We have legacies right now that we're building on, and one day our spirits will leave the body, and there we will be with the ancestors. Nobody wants to be forgotten. Every life is significant. Everyone has a story, and we have to thank the ancestors, because without them, we would not be present right now. So that is a key reason why it's important to speak their names, because they spoke your names first. They
Mm.
spoke your names first, and you owe it to them to speak their names and then continue to speak into the next generation. It's simple math. No one wants to be forgotten.
That's right.
Everyone wants their story remembered, and it goes by like that. So that's why I feel so blessed by speaking the names of my fathers and my mothers, and I can go back more than 250 years and speak the names going back to before America was America. Africans were here. And of course, we know so many of those individuals were erased. Erasure is such a major thing with people of color as well as indigenous people. But it's up to us as writers. You and I are writers. We're journalists. We are the keepers of the flame. It's so important for us to write in and make sure it's preserved because of the times we're living in right now. This is Exhibit A, what we're living through.
You've written books. Could you name each book for us?
So the first book I wrote was called Die Free, a heroic family tale. That's when I uncovered everything. And I literally vomited on the page because it was something I wanted to know my entire life. And then when I was able to put it all together, I sort of wrote about my dad's life, and I paralleled with Sandy's life. So Sandy was born in 1840. My dad was born in 1942. And I sort of, each chapter goes back and forth through their lives. One born free in Tennessee, the other born enslaved in Tennessee, and how their lives unfolded chapter by chapter. And I was very proud of that book, remain proud of that book. And then the second book is called The Emancipation of Grandpa Sandy Wills, which is an illustrated children's book. And it's about me having a dream that I meet Sandy Wills in my newsroom here in New York City. And I interview him. I ask him all the questions that a child would ask him, like, what was it like being a slave? He was sold to Edmund Wills when he was 10 years old. There are not many people who can pinpoint the exact year that their ancestor was enslaved, and the name of the person, Edmund Wills, who forced the last name, the surname upon them, which carries today. That's an empowering thing to be able to say, I'm Cheryl Wills because of this act, this crime against humanity. And that's the exact person who forced his name on my great 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 grandfather. So that was the second book. The third book is called Emma. It's a companion book to The Emancipation of Grandpa Sandy Wills, and it's about his wife. I think I'm most tied to Emma because she was a girl like me, a firstborn girl. And she was born in Tennessee. I was born in New York City, but she was born enslaved. And she lived as a little girl to go from slavery to freedom. And I write what her life was like living on the Moore plantation, the Moors, the same people I dealt with. And then the fourth book is called Emancipated, My Family's Fight for Freedom. And that's a YA book, really for middle and high school students. And it's sort of a shorter version of Die Free. And then the fifth book is an unrelated book about the power of gospel music by HarperCollins. So I'm really proud of all the books. They circulate in schools. You know, I never thought you and I, Ajay, would be talking about how our books are not welcome, especially in the South now. I mean, how horrific is this that there's a suppression of free speech? It's almost unthinkable, but if you appreciate history, it's actually not unthinkable. It's happened time and time again. This is sort of the first step into something that could become very scary. Silence the journalists, silence the historians, silence the actors. And history shows that once you do that, the next step is usually very terrifying. And here we are being silenced. Here are our books being yanked out of libraries. I saw some of my books on eBay, and it was like all these library books that were just shipped to eBay. And I'm like, why are all my books taken out of libraries all of a sudden? So it's very upsetting. And we're going to continue to speak freely. We're going to continue to fight the good fight. And as our grandparents said in church, a common phrase for our people said in church, no weapon formed against us shall prosper. And weapons have been formed against us historically, and they have never prospered. So I'm keeping the faith that we too will rise again.
Could you explain all the different people that you had to work with to uncover this family history?
Archaeologists, that's the big one. I received quite the education. I had never worked with an archaeology team before. And I had to your point, completely yield to them because they are scientists. They had empathy for my journey, but they told me straight away, they said, we want to be clear. While we appreciate your family history, when we go down there, if he's not there, he's just not there.
Wow.
We don't want you to think we're gonna pretend we found him. And I said, I got you. And I was warned that the soil was silty, meaning it was not ideal for bone preservation. And they said, do you understand the risk associated with what you're doing? And I said, I am moving in blind faith. Yes, I understand. And they said, you do. They made me sign things. You do understand that we may do all this work and we'll look right at you and say, there's nothing here. And you're not going to blame us because we are scientists. We are not activists. And I
Right.
said, I understand. I perfectly understand the risk associated with this venture. I also had to deal with attorneys because there were serious legal ramifications. Like I said, you can't go dig up any cemetery, burial ground, or graveyard just because you have a hunch. You have to provide proof that your mission is based in fact and not in motion. and I had to compile all of my data, turn it over to an attorney. She had to do her due diligence and present it to a judge. And further, we had to put a public notice in Tennessee newspapers to
Mm.
say, this is our intent. That's part of the process in the legal world. And I remember saying, oh my goodness, you mean someone could see this public notice, object, reach out to the court and dead this whole thing? Okay. So I
Mhm.
remember I took a beat and I said, this is in your hands. Literally talking to the ancestors through my heart. This is in your hands. I hope you don't get some crazy person to rise up and say absolutely not, because they could dead this whole thing. Ajay,
Mm.
not one person objected. And that's when we moved full speed ahead, and the judge gave us permission to do what we needed to do. So, from the archaeology team to the lawyers, and of course, the professional genealogists. Now,
Mm.
I'm an amateur genealogist, proudly so, but I'm not an expert. I had to hire experts to make sure my information was spot on. Because again, when you get to this level, no one cares what you wish, they only care about facts. So I had to yield to a professional genealogist, and they had all of the supporting data to prove that I was unequivocally the great 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 granddaughter of Sandy Wills, without question. I mean, there couldn't be a question about it. And lastly, I had to deal with the United States military. All
Right.
of this information had to be turned over to them, Aj, and they conducted their own investigation as if
Mm.
nothing I do mattered. Because,
Wow.
isn't that interesting? Because
That is.
think about it. They could say, you know what? You could have been in cahoots with all these people. We're now taking all of this data and making sure you are who you say you are. We're going to make sure this archaeology team actually did find Sandy Wills, and we'll get back to you. And it took months, and I was just on. That was the only time I almost broke, when I
Mm.
did all this work, turned it over to them. And I mean, it was so much data I had to give them. And then they were like, thanks, we'll let you know. And I remember saying, when? They were
Wow.
like, we'll just let you know. And every week that went by,
Mm.
I was like, I can't believe this. And it's funny, I was in South Carolina visiting the African American Museum there when I got a text that it was all approved and they would be honored to rebury Sandy Wills. So, to your point, I had to deal with so many people that had expertise that I did not have. And I had to humble myself and learn and wait.
What advice would you give to those who want to research their own family history, but may not know where to start, or may not have some of the resources that you had at your disposal? What would you suggest to them?
Start where you are, get a notebook, and keep a chart, a family tree of all of your ancestors. Write it down. There's so much power when you physically write things down. And I've been doing that since I was a little girl. The power of the writing is incredible. And don't worry about what you don't know. Just work with what you know. Dig into the US Census, which is available for free to everyone on multiple genealogy websites. Find your family, even the random uncle, the random aunt, great great aunt. Write down every little bit and be obsessed with it, because this work is not for the faint of heart. You are going to run into roadblocks, especially when dealing with Black families. We were transient much of the time. We were escaping trauma much of the time. And you'll see us move from place to place, as in my family. My grandfather lived in Chicago. He lived in Indiana. He lived in Ohio, Tennessee, and finally ended in New York. That makes people hard to trace. But
Hmm.
luckily, I had the oral history because I knew my grandparents. But I was also fortunate that for Sandy, he never left Tennessee. He never left Tennessee. His children never left Tennessee. His grandchildren didn't leave Tennessee. And in fact, my grandfather and father were born in the same town as Sandy Wills. I got very lucky in that respect that I had that stability. That's why, even to this day, I crave stability. If things are not stable, I don't even walk into it because I know it's going to just throw me off. I come from a lot of stability. So find the family that's been most stable. That's a treasure trove because people who
Mm,
stay in one place for a long time, they leave lots of records. They
mhm.
leave, they join the military and then they came back. Dig into the military records. With Black people, the odds of you having a military veteran is very high because this was basically the only opportunity for Black men to escape from suffocating, horrific conditions.
Mhm.
Sure, and you're going to give me a uniform and you're going to pay me and I get to travel. I'm in. I mean, this
That's
was a
right.
no brainer. So many, a disproportionately high number of Black men volunteered during the Civil War just because it was like, okay, oh, slavery, join the army. I'm in the army. I mean, this was duh,
That's
right?
right.
So, and the same, it was same in the World War One. My mother's father was a World War One veteran, and all of the documents associated are just priceless because he joined a segregated unit during World War One, the Doughboys. The, they're not talked about as much like World War Two veterans. So the fact that my maternal grandfather was a military veteran is just a golden for me. So find the military records, get the census records, keep everything in a binder and keep referencing. And what you'll find, and this is where the magic comes in, if you will, for lack of a better word, you'll find that you're going to start to create a narrative. Oh, okay. So I see my family was patriotic. Oh, wow. I see they were very resilient. Or in some cases, you'll see families that were devastated by racism. Devastated. Black people had primarily two reactions to living in a state of terror. And it really was a state of terror.
Mm,
They either rose above it and were able to say, you will not break me. You're not going to break my family. I have that in my family. And
mm,
then you had some families who said, you know what? This is so unfair. And my wife was raped. I couldn't save her. And we're all shattered. And we need help. And there's no help to be found. To hell with it.
mm,
And so you always had those two dynamics. And I'm not judging either one, to be
mhm,
clear, because there before the grace of God go any of us. How do you respond to rape? How do you respond to you did everything you were supposed to do and they still slam the door in your face? You have two different types of people, those who will say, you can't break me, and those who will say, I'm broken. And now I'm
mhm.
going to drown my pain in this bottle. Now I'm going to drown in violence. And so it's just two powerful dynamics that I think have clearly been evident in the Black narrative, right?
Yeah.
And these two groups have always kind of been at odds over classism that we know so well. Those who rose above and those who were just beyond shattered by what they experienced. And again, never judging either group, but grateful that all survived.
What are some of your upcoming projects? I believe I read that you got a new show or a new time or
Yeah.
something of that nature.
So as you know, I work for Spectrum News, which is a national news network. And I have a talk show called In Focus with Cheryl Wills that airs every Sunday. It can be seen nationally on the Spectrum News app, on ny1.com, and certainly on Spectrum News stations all across the country. And I also, I am now the nightly news anchor coming on at 8 p.m., based out of New York City. And again, that can be seen, people watch in North Carolina and Florida, Texas, California, all over the country, wherever Spectrum News is. And it's a national news network. And We're working on some really exciting projects as it relates to amplifying the discovery of Sandy Wills and reburial. I'm not at liberty to say yet because they told me not to. My agents told me not to, but some big things are about to pop off. You're going to be front row with the family.
That's what's up.
Yes, God bless you and your family. Always an honor. Thank you for this opportunity. I am very grateful to you. I really am for 40 plus years of friendship.